"You're not on the list." That's what the security guy said. Flat, professional, like he was telling me the kitchen had just run out of the special. I stood there in a tailored jacket, holding a box with a pen I'd had custom engraved 6 months ago. Megan's name on one side, mine on the other. It was supposed to be a stupid, sentimental thing, a nod to when we were broke grad students sharing a single desk lamp and fighting over keyboard shortcuts. I gave him a polite smile. "I'm with Megan Collins. She's a manager, table 9. He didn't even pretend to check again. "Tonight's for department leads and approved +1s only." I blinked. I am her +1. She didn't list a guest. And there it was, the slap that doesn't leave a mark, but you feel it down to your molars. Behind him, through the glass doors, I could see the ballroom already filling up. White linens, faux candles, a sea of name tags on little clips. I scanned the tables. She was easy to spot. Megan always liked center placement. There she was, seated comfortably, hair curled just enough to look effortless but not too try-hard, laughing like she belonged there more than anyone. Her head tilted slightly, the body language that said, "I'm in control here." Next to her, Brent Langston, her ex, the one from Stanford, the one she said she hadn't seen in years, the one whose name she once flinched at when it popped up on LinkedIn. And now he's back, wearing the same smug, tight-jawed smile I remember from that one alumni mixer where he introduced himself to me as Megan's first mistake. I stood still. Even the intern, the goddamn intern who'd started 4 days ago, had brought a date. She was snapping selfies with him in front of the step and repeat banner like she'd just discovered Tech Bro Prom. My name wasn't on the list. I wasn't even considered, not by the committee, and not by Megan. And let me say this bluntly, that moment, the moment you realize you're not an afterthought, you're an inconvenience, that sticks with a man. It doesn't hurt, it freezes. I didn't make a scene, didn't march in, didn't throw the box. I just stepped aside, thanked the guard, and made my way to the hotel lounge, still within Wi-Fi range. Opened my laptop. Now, before I go further, let me just pause for a second and say this. If you're listening and you haven't subscribed, do it. More than 90% of you hear these stories, feel that jolt of recognition, but never click that little button. It's free, and yeah, it helps me and the team bring you better, sharper stories, ones you don't forget. Like this one. Back to it. See, Megan always thought I was between roles. That was her phrasing. She told friends I was consulting, like I was floating between bar stools and job boards, just waiting for someone to hand me a badge and a reason to wake up. What she didn't know is that for the last 9 months, I've been working quietly with the parent firm of her company. Internal audit, strategic compliance. My name didn't appear anywhere official. I signed NDAs so heavy they might as well have come with lead weights, but I saw everything. And 6 months ago, something started bothering me. Promotion patterns, budget reassignments, department reorgs that didn't make sense on paper, but benefited the same cluster of people. One name kept showing up, Brent Langston. His boutique tech consultancy had landed 3 internal vendor deals in a year. Odd, considering they didn't win a single open bid. Odder still, the internal documentation approving those contracts were always signed off by Megan, buried in procurement metadata, timestamps that didn't align with public reports, meeting records marked verbal only. I started logging it, quietly, no accusations, just spreadsheets, email headers, meeting audits. Then came the late-night calls. Megan would head into the living room at 11:45 p.m., whispering about timeline pivots and reorg urgency. She was always vague, always, "It's complicated, don't worry about it." I worried about it, but not like she thought. I wasn't jealous, I was interested. There's a difference. When the gala invite came and I saw it was labeled +1 optional, I didn't bring it up. Just said, "Let me know what time to meet you there." She smiled. "I'll let you know." She never did, and now she's in that ballroom with her hand on Brent's wrist like he's the one who helped her up the corporate ladder and not the one who built the back door she crawled through. So I clicked on the folder I'd been updating for months, the one titled Ethics Concern M. Collins. Inside, a PDF with document chains, audit trails, screenshots, internal messages where she referred to him as B and told her assistant to make it look normal. I attached it to an email. Subject line, Urgent compliance review, vendor selection process, Dipturn 14, CC, internal legal, 2 board members, and a compliance director, BCC, 1 journalist I trusted, just in case. And then I hovered over the send button. I could still see her through the window, sipping champagne, tilting her head toward Brent. They looked happy, like no one had ever told them that castles built on quiet corruption never last long. My finger pressed the key, and I whispered to myself, let's see who's on the list now. The email wasn't for her. It was never going to be. I sat in the dim light of the hotel lounge, nestled in a corner booth that still smelled faintly like disinfectant and overpriced bourbon. Just outside the frosted glass doors, the gala continued. Some exec was probably giving a pre-scripted speech about innovation and core values, while my wife toasted with the man she swore she'd deleted from her life. My laptop booted up fast. I didn't rush. This wasn't vengeance served hot. This was the slow draw of a scalpel across skin. I opened the inbox, searched Brent, emails, dozens, not between her and Brent. Those were too clean, too sparse. No, the real data was in what wasn't said, and where it wasn't supposed to be. 6 months ago, I noticed Megan's LinkedIn getting oddly quiet. No new certifications, no updates. That was my first clue. Megan lives for polished updates. She once updated her title on the same day she got a lateral move, just added strategic in front of manager like it came with a crown. But then there were the internal posts, promotions, reorgs. Some of them made sense, some didn't. I started digging, not out of suspicion, but boredom. You live with someone long enough, you know their rhythms. Megan was offbeat. She started getting home later, not absurdly late, just off. 20 minutes here, a coffee she never drank in the car. And then there were the names. Each org chart change in her department came with a curious set of executive endorsements, names of people supposedly vouching for promotions or restructuring. But the emails were shallow, templated, almost too clean, except for one name that kept coming up beneath them. Brent Langston. His startup was supposedly a preferred vendor, though I couldn't find a single press release or contract award notice about it. Not public, not internal. It was as if his consultancy operated in the same office but lived in the walls, present but invisible. And yet, Megan's calendar kept reflecting last-minute strategy syncs labeled off-site. Here's the part that matters. She didn't know I'd taken a contract with her parent firm. She thought I was between jobs. That was her favorite phrase lately. I know it's hard not working, she said once offhandedly, while sipping wine and scrolling TikTok. I wasn't not working. I was auditing for a massive restructuring project they'd contracted me on, quietly, remotely, which meant, yes, I had access to all of it. Employee activity logs, financial records, vendor billing flowcharts. It was all right there, and I wasn't some guy scrolling through his wife's texts looking for a missed I love you. I was methodical, clinical. Every data point had to hold up. Every assumption had to be stress tested, because what I was building wasn't a gotcha moment. It was a weapon. Tonight, I opened the folder. Inside, a procurement pattern analysis showing Brent's firm had bypassed bidding processes 6 times. A time overlay chart comparing Megan's calendar entries to vendor meetings she denied ever having. Internal chat exports between procurement officers that said things like, "This again? Didn't we just onboard Langston's team last quarter?" Screenshot of a Slack message from Brent to a junior dev. "Just run it through Megan. She'll clear it like last time." Every piece linked back, not directly, not in a way she could immediately be handcuffed for, but enough for internal audit to raise a dozen red flags, plus 1 blazing bonfire. And the crowning piece? A spreadsheet titled innocuously Q2 Pipeline Projections, Draft. Except in the metadata, the original author wasn't Megan. It was Brent. Last modified the day Megan was working late at HQ. Only HQ's access log showed her badge never scanned in that night. I stared at the cursor blinking in the email body. Subject line, internal ethics concern, vendor procurement manipulation. 2, head of audit, corporate legal, and executive compliance oversight. No emojis, no salacious details, just hard, clean documentation. I blind copied two others. One, the journalist I mentioned earlier, a contact from a policy summit who'd once said, if you ever find a real corporate rot story, something airtight, call me. The second, an anonymous ethics board contact drop that had been floated to me during onboarding, the kind of email that gets read before your manager even sees it. I typed one sentence in the body, please see attached documentation regarding multiple vendor-related policy breaches involving internal staff and non-competitive award patterns. I hovered over the send button. Behind me, the lounge TV played muted news loops, something about market volatility. I almost laughed. Markets weren't volatile, people were. And Megan had gambled that the one man she cut out of her night was the one without any cards. She had no idea I owned the whole deck. I hit send, then sat back, and waited for the buzz of phones. The first seed of doubt wasn't some earth-shattering revelation. No lipstick on a collar, no whispered phone call in the night, just a tone in her voice. Megan had a voice she used for corporate maneuvering, a calm, measured cadence that said nothing clearly, but implied everything with surgical precision. I used to admire it, watching her navigate tough meetings, pivot under pressure, slide past confrontation like a knife through silk. It was part of why I fell for her. But lately, that voice had started leaking into our home like smoke through old vents. It was always late, past midnight. I'd hear her in the kitchen or on the patio, pacing in those quiet, padded steps she probably thought sounded considerate. And I never eavesdropped, at least not in the traditional sense, but when you live with someone long enough, you don't need to press your ear to the door. The patterns reveal themselves. It needs to stay off paper, she said one night. That's what snapped the wire. I was in bed, lights off, not asleep. A few seconds passed, then she added, we just needed to pass the optics test. Brent can fill the gaps with his team if procurement doesn't ask too many questions. Brent, she hadn't said that name in a long time, not since she claimed they were cordial exes who'd outgrown each other. But now, he was part of an off-paper team reorg. I didn't confront her. Not immediately. I just remembered. Like a knife tucking into the lining of a coat, I tucked it away, because instinct said this wasn't a one-off. The next morning, I checked her work bag, not for messages, not for journals, just for the traces. I found a folded-up agenda from a strategy retreat, company-branded, with small scribbles in the margin. 2-3 pilot vendors, Q3, avoid Langston overlap. Langston, Brent Langston. I took a picture, didn't touch anything else. That same week, I called a guy named Donnie, a former colleague of mine who'd recently finished a short-term consulting stint in finance operations at Megan's company. We met for drinks. I let the conversation drift until I casually asked, you ever see anything weird over in Megan's department? He snorted into his whiskey. Define weird. You tell me. Donnie leaned in. There were a couple of budget diversions, not criminal, just strategic reshuffling. You know, ghost allocations, side pilots. To where? Some boutique vendor they're testing, Lang Tech or Lang Corp. I forget. Langston. I didn't show it, just nodded. Usual vendor process? Not really, no RFPs, kind of got waved through with a smile and a handshake. That's above my pay grade, though. That was all I needed. Over the next 4 weeks, I built a dossier. Quietly, strategically. This wasn't just about Brent, or even Megan. This was about trust being converted into currency and spent without consent. I charted the financials. Megan's department had made at least 3 small but suspicious reallocations to pilot innovation pools, not enough to trigger alarms. But the recipients? Shell vendors, all with linked digital fingerprints, shared hosting servers, same administrative email domain, and all roads led back to Brent. I pulled registry data, reverse image searched logos, found one file on GitHub under a fake dev name that was traced to an IP Brent used for a side project back in grad school. Megan, meanwhile, had been careful. No direct emails. She used Slack channels that auto-deleted, meeting notes that read like corporate haiku, align timelines, accelerate testing, vendor optionality. It all smelled like compliance, but tasted like bleach. She underestimated one thing, me, because while she was busy curating image, I was curating evidence. I didn't bring it up in therapy, didn't weaponize it in a fight. That's what she expected. She expected hurt feelings, suspicion, wounded ego. She thought I'd ask her, are you seeing him again? so she could roll her eyes and say, "You're being paranoid, it's just work." She was wrong. I didn't ask. I opened a private Google Drive instead and started uploading PDFs like I was saving chapters of a very polite war. And tonight, as the ballroom music pulsed behind thick glass, I finalized the file, titled it plainly, Internal Ethics Concern, Urgent. The PDF was 17 pages, not dramatic, no bitter language, just side-by-side comparisons, overlapping vendor trails and metadata breakdowns. A paper trail she never thought anyone would follow. I attached it to the email, let her laugh with Brent, let her pass champagne flutes and smirk while I sat outside the circle. She thought I'd been dismissed, but I'd simply been documenting. That's the thing about being underestimated. It buys you time, and I used every second of it. I stared at the screen one last time, cursor blinking like a pulse, file attached, timestamp analysis, budget reallocation trails, side vendor pilot breakdowns with supporting invoice metadata, flowchart mapping the procurement manipulation, 17 pages, no fluff, no theory, just wait. I reread the subject line, internal ethics concern, vendor procurement manipulation. My finger hovered over the mouse. CC'd internal compliance officer, general counsel, Megan's senior VP. BCC'd one investigative tech journalist I met at a startup ethics panel 3 years ago. And another, an anonymous tip box at a digital watchdog nonprofit that specializes in unregulated internal procurement exposure. Then I did something Megan always mocked me for. I closed my eyes and breathed. One full inhale, no ceremony, just discipline, and clicked send. It made no sound. The world didn't shake. My screen didn't explode in fanfare, just a quiet confirmation at the bottom. Message sent. That's it. Months of work out of my hands. Irreversible. No more editing, no more cross-checking. The bullet was fired. I closed the laptop and let it sit on the table face down like a laid weapon. Then I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and made my way down the hallway toward the gala entrance. Not to enter, God no, but to watch. The ballroom was sealed behind soundproofed glass, a gleaming fishbowl of tailored ambition and sponsored hors d'oeuvres. I leaned against the side wall just outside the archway, like I was waiting for someone. I wasn't. Inside, Megan sat mid-table at the center ring, exactly where I knew she would be, hand resting delicately on a stemmed glass. Eyes narrowed slightly as someone beside her delivered a punchline she'd already heard before. Her polite, performative laugh flicked through the air like a switch. To her left, Brent, looking like he belonged to the room, but was bored by it. That was always his thing. Wearing tailored suits like handcuffs, he'd managed to convince entire C-suites that his aloofness was vision. Megan leaned in, whispered something. He smirked. She tilted her glass, about to sip. Then her phone lit up on the table. A message. She glanced. Froze. Her smile dropped half a degree, not enough for a stranger to notice, but I'd lived beside that face long enough to catch the crack. Then it buzzed again. She picked it up, eyebrows pinching. Brent leaned slightly to peek. His own phone vibrated next. He pulled it from his pocket with a lazy motion until his screen flashed. Then his body language stiffened. Eyes darted toward the exits. Across the room, a man in a gray suit excused himself mid-toast and stepped away from the podium. Phone pressed to his ear. Another buzz and another. The air inside didn't shift, not yet, but I could see it tightening. Little silences where there should have been laughter, a tightening of shoulders, a half-aborted toast at one of the sponsor tables. The senior VP from Megan's branch appeared in the back, flanked by a woman with a lanyard I recognized. Internal Compliance, DC office. I knew her, briefly consulted alongside her 2 years ago during a supply chain dispute. They weren't smiling. They weren't sipping anything. They were scanning, looking. Someone at the far table leaned over to whisper something to a guy with a board pin on his lapel. That guy looked up, straight at Megan. It hit her like a slow wave. She stood suddenly. Too fast. Glass rattled. Brent reached to steady it and muttered something. She didn't respond. Just checked her phone again. Scrolled, tapped, froze. My email had just detonated. Inside the ballroom, a fire had started. But no one had screamed yet. I didn't smirk, didn't gloat, didn't feel that cliché rush of revenge, just numb anticipation. Because this wasn't about ego. It wasn't about payback. It was about architecture. And I had spent months quietly engineering a collapse. She had publicly erased me tonight, reduced me to a forgotten name not worthy of a line on a guest list. So I'd made sure that every person above her, every name she spent years trying to impress, would now see exactly what her access was built on. Not talent, not merit, just Brent. And just like that, through the glass, I watched as my absence became the loudest presence in the room. Brent's phone lit up first. He glanced at it with the same bored indifference he always wore, thumbed the screen like it was another calendar reminder he could ignore. Then, in a blink, his whole posture changed. Gone was the relaxed lean the half-smile meant for optics. His shoulders squared, his eyes scanned the room like a man realizing too late he's already inside the blast radius. Megan noticed. She tilted her head toward him, probably expecting a joke or another sarcastic jab about small minds and big suits, but Brent didn't speak, didn't move. His thumb hovered over the screen like he wasn't sure if touching it again would make it worse. Then Megan's phone buzzed, and buzzed again, and again. She picked it up, unlocked it. Her brow furrowed immediately, like the screen had suddenly stopped speaking English. Across the ballroom, the senior VP, still holding a mic mid-toast, squinted at his own phone, paused awkwardly, muttered something about "excuse me," and stepped off stage. He barely made it past the curtain before another call came in. Then a woman appeared at the far entrance. Petite, sharp blazer, no name tag. I knew her by sight. Cynthia, junior compliance officer from HQ, a rising pit bull in heels. She was speaking quickly into a headset, scanning the room like she'd just been dropped into a crime scene where the suspect was still at the table. 2 tables over, a quiet exchange began. A napkin discreetly dropped. A phone slid face down. 4 executives, none of them under 50, shared a glance that didn't need words. They weren't looking at the stage anymore. They were looking at Megan. One of them stood, slowly, walked across the room with the composure of someone about to change the trajectory of another person's life. Megan saw him coming and tried to compose her face, eyes wide, then narrowing, then lifting slightly in polite acknowledgement. A neutral smile. He didn't smile back. He leaned down and said something too low to hear. Brent instinctively leaned in to listen too, but the exec held up a hand. "Not you." Megan's smile faltered, then vanished. She asked something, gesturing at her phone, which had just started buzzing again. She scrolled, then tapped, then froze. A second later, she stood up. Not calmly, not theatrically, just quick and awkward, like her body had moved before her mind could tell it how to behave. She looked at Brent. He wasn't looking at her. He was checking the exits. Across the room, Cynthia from compliance was making her way toward the table, not running, but fast. Her headset buzzed as she passed a waiter. The waiter instinctively moved out of her way, like he sensed something bigger than the hors d'oeuvres coming through. Megan turned her head slowly. It wasn't drama. It was dread, like a person watching clouds shift into a funnel. She didn't know the source yet, didn't know what was in the email, but she knew, absolutely knew, that she was the center of it because people weren't looking at her with her anymore. They were looking at her. I watched through the glass, seated on a leather bench outside the ballroom entrance. One leg crossed calmly over the other. The jazz trio kept playing. The servers kept pouring. The room didn't stop, but Megan had. For the first time in years, she wasn't in control. She wasn't curating. She wasn't framing her own narrative. She was reacting. A woman who'd once said, "You're too quiet, Miles. No one notices quiet men," now being undone by silence. The kind that watches, the kind that listens, the kind that waits until the moment can't be undone. Her phone buzzed again, and from my seat I could see her hand shake just slightly. That was enough. The board's general counsel wasn't even supposed to attend. He was there as a courtesy guest, one of those last-minute additions corporate throws in to make it look like legal and leadership stay connected. Nobody expected him to do more than sip sparkling water and compliment the fish. But then his phone lit up. Twice, then again. He stood slowly, quietly excused himself from a circle of overly eager department heads, and made his way toward the far end of the ballroom where Brent was standing near the bar, nursing a drink he clearly didn't want anymore. No one saw the two of them speak, except me. I watched from the edge of the lounge, partially hidden by the tinted glass. General counsel leaned in, didn't shout, didn't posture, just held his phone up, screen forward, and let Brent read. Brent's face didn't flinch, but his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle from 40 feet away. He nodded once, then again, then muttered something and started scrolling through his own phone with jerky movements, like the messages were arriving faster than he could process them. What they were looking at, what had been opened, forwarded, screenshot, shared, was a flowchart, one of many in the file I'd sent. But this one hit like a grenade. It laid out in precise, unarguable steps how procurement policies had been quietly restructured in the last 12 months to allow flexibility for innovation partnerships. It showed who signed what, when the signatures were logged, and how the adjusted guidelines disproportionately benefited a company called Vanta Solutions, Brent's company, a company that hadn't gone through a single competitive bid process. Each approval, greenlit using Megan's credentials. Each timestamp, verified through internal systems. Immutable. Each sign-off, attached to projects that technically didn't exist on official quarterly summaries. The spreadsheet even included badge entry logs, showing that Megan had approved access changes for Brent's team 3 days before the contracts were supposedly initiated. This wasn't a gray area. This was a mural of malpractice signed in ink. Meanwhile, Megan's phone vibrated like a live wire in her hand. Her inbox was caving in, notifications stacked. Internal, urgent, please confirm vendor oversight chain. Legal, immediate request for compliance documentation. PR, media contact from the ledger, please advise. HR, we've scheduled a review, please confirm availability. She'd stopped trying to respond. She just stood near the edge of the stage, frozen, watching executives whisper, huddle, check their phones, and not include her. Everywhere she turned, people were half looking at her, then away. Conversation stopped when she approached. Laughter dulled, so she did the only thing she could think of. She walked out. Not dramatically, not in protest, just like someone trying to escape a dream that had turned sideways. She exited the ballroom, her heels a little less certain on the polished tile. The soft music behind her was still playing, but the rhythm was broken. I heard the door open behind me. I didn't turn around, not at first. Miles, she said, her voice low, rushed, barely above a whisper. Where are you? I tilted my head just enough so she could see my profile, didn't speak. Miles, she said again, I don't know what's happening, but... You don't? I asked, finally standing. That's interesting. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I walked past her slowly, deliberately, stopping only when I was just at her side. They're going to ask you for everything, I said quietly. Your notes, your access logs, your Slack exports, even the coffee receipts. She blinked. You set this up? No, I replied. You did. She shook her head. I don't understand. Why would you... You left me off the list, Megan. The list. For your night. I paused and gave Brent the seat next to you. Again. That wasn't... God, Miles, this wasn't personal. It was a mistake. It was a pattern, I said, cutting her off. A mistake is one dinner, one call, one oversight. This was infrastructure. She backed up a step. Her phone buzzed again in her hand. She didn't check it. They'll know I didn't act alone, she whispered. They already do, I said, walking toward the elevator. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Behind me, I could hear the panic rising in her breath, even as the silence swallowed her whole. Because for the first time, Megan understood. This wasn't a smear, it was a mirror. And the reflection wasn't something she could walk away from. She spotted me in the lobby like a drowning woman spots shore. Laptop closed, hands folded on the table. I hadn't moved. I hadn't needed to. The ballroom behind her had gone quiet in the way buildings do just before demolition, standing tall, pretending to hold, while foundations shift beneath polished floors. Her heels clicked faster as she rushed toward me, phone still buzzing in her hand like a dying animal. Miles, she said, breathless, half whisper, half dagger. What did you do? I looked up slowly. No smile, no theatrics. Just stood with the kind of quiet resolve that drives control freaks insane. Everything I needed to, I said. You denied me a seat, Megan, but you gave him one. She blinked fast, as if tears could reboot the conversation. Her voice broke slightly. It's not what you think. I raised one eyebrow. Might want to revise that, because it's exactly what I think, and now others see it too. Her hand flew to her chest, reflexive, rehearsed, that wounded expression she used whenever an argument outpaced her deflection strategy. "This is crazy," she said. "You're blowing this out of proportion. It was just—" "What?" I cut in, calm. "Just business? Just innovation? Just a series of untraceable off-paper decisions you assume no one would ever audit?" Her lips parted, but nothing came out. I stepped forward, slow and even. "You knew exactly what Brent was, and you let him back in. You funneled access, pushed his invoices, bent policy to cover him, and you thought no one would notice." Tears welled up. She looked around. People were watching now, from the hallway, from the bar, from behind the glass. Not listening, just watching, like spectators at the beginning of a fall. "I didn't do this alone," she hissed, low and desperate. "No," I said, "but you did it loud enough for everyone to hear it now." She reached for my arm, but I pulled back. Not cruelly, just firmly. That's when security arrived. Two men in matching dark suits, earpieces tucked behind well-groomed hair. One of them had a guest list folder in his hand. "Ms. Collins," one said, neutral tone, "we need to speak with you privately." Megan turned, face red, voice cracking. "He's my husband. He's not on the list." "We're aware," the guard said. "That's not the issue anymore." Her face twitched. "Then what is the issue?" The other guard glanced toward a woman approaching from the elevator. Cynthia from compliance. Still in heels, still calm, still not making eye contact with Megan. Megan's voice rose. "I work here. This is my team. I have clearance." Cynthia didn't even slow her pace. She stepped past Megan and handed a sealed envelope to the security guard. He took it, turned to Megan. "Ma'am, I'm going to need your phone and badge," he said, still professionally polite, "until this matter is resolved." That's when she broke. "Wait, no, what? You can't do this here. This is insane." She looked back at me, pleading now. "Miles, please tell them. This isn't—" I didn't speak. I just watched. Because she wasn't talking to me anymore. She was talking to the void. That's what terrified her most. Not the consequences, not the investigation, but the silence, the vacuum where her power used to live. And for a woman who curated every room she entered, that silence was unbearable. She kept going, kept trying to explain, justify, perform, but no one was listening. Not really. Because denial loses its power when the lights are on and everyone's looking. Especially when the man you erase walks out of the shadows and doesn't even need to raise his voice. And so I turned and walked away. Not because I was done, but because she was. By morning, it was everywhere. No headlines, no press releases, not yet. But inside the company, behind the polished logos and HR-safe phrasing, the blood had already started to move toward the edges. It started in Slack, not with a blast message, those never come first, but with a ripple, a subtle shift in tone in channels that used to be flooded with emojis and braggy windposts. Procurement team. "Can we get clarity on Vanta contracts? I'm locking Q4 and someone just told me to pause everything." Leadership ops. "Quick heads up, anyone with open vendor authorizations, please DM me before EOD. Whispers and warnings. Private, invite only." What the hell is happening with Megan? She's on leave though. Not fired, yet. Did anyone actually read that PDF? Brent's company page is offline. Someone said internal audit triggered it. Whole compliance team worked overnight. By 10:17 a.m., the emergency board meeting was announced. Strategic realignment discussion. Mandatory for all directors. Translation: damage control. Megan's calendar was wiped clean. Her profile photo on the company intranet changed to a gray silhouette. Temporary leave. Pending investigation. Not a suspension. Not termination. Not yet. But if you knew the language, you knew what that meant. That's the legal equivalent of setting fire to the lifeboats while the ship still pretends it isn't sinking. Brent's consultancy was worse off. All his contracts were marked under legal review, POs frozen, all dev access revoked, no badge activity, no answers. I didn't get any messages, no thanks, no follow-up calls, no "we're taking this seriously" pep talk. Just one encrypted email from the internal audit division. Subject: Submission ID 6A984B body. "Thank you, we've reviewed your findings. The investigation is ongoing." Signed with a digital stamp, no name. That was all I needed. I made coffee. Real coffee. None of that French-pressed virtue signaling Megan used to do with beans that cost more than whiskey. just a straight, bitter brew. I drank it slowly, watching the light change across the living room floor like time itself was exhaling. No fireworks, no swelling orchestral strings, just closure. Cold, clean, earned. She hadn't come home. Not that night, not that morning. I imagined she was still somewhere trying to make calls, replaying old conversations in her head, asking herself where the leak had started. But there was no leak. There was just me. And I didn't whisper. I didn't leak. I documented. I delivered. The truth didn't need a megaphone. It just needed a timestamp, a signature, and a quiet moment when someone finally looked under the carpet Megan had spent years sweeping things beneath. The fallout wasn't loud. It was procedural. And there's nothing colder than a corporation realizing you're a liability in a tailored dress. Megan's name wasn't trending, but it was circulating. In the Slack DMs, in the email chains with subject lines like F urgent re-procurement anomalies, in legal rooms where no one cared how charming you were in interviews. For years, she built her identity on knowing how to read rooms. But she forgot the most important one, the audit room, the one with no applause, no champagne, just hard chairs, colder stares, and a whiteboard with your initials written under exposures. She had always believed in performance. And in the end, she gave the best one of her life. Because now everyone was watching, and no one clapped. She came home around 9:40 p.m., didn't use her key, didn't knock, just stood in the open doorway for a long second like the house might reject her on its own. I was on the couch, lights low, not reading, not working, just waiting. She stepped inside carefully, as if the walls might shatter if she moved too fast. Her heels were gone, hair tied back in a half collapse of what used to be a boardroom bun, no makeup, no mask. In her left hand, a duffel bag. She walked into the kitchen without speaking, set the bag down on the counter, avoided eye contact. "I'm just here to get some things," she said finally, not looking at me. I nodded once, said nothing. She moved through the house like a stranger, pausing only when she reached the hall closet. That pause wasn't for the coat. It was for the photograph taped to the inside of the door, the one we took on our 5th anniversary in Sonoma. She used to tell people it was the only picture where she looked genuinely happy without trying. She didn't take it down, just closed the door. Back in the living room, she stood for a moment, hands on the strap of the bag. "We built this life together," she said, barely above a whisper. I let the words sit there, let them echo between walls she hadn't looked at in months. Then I stood, calm. "You built it on access," I said. "I built it on facts." She blinked. The air left her lungs in a quiet exhale. It wasn't sorrow. It was resignation. Her eyes scanned the room like she was trying to remember what parts were hers. The coffee table? No, that was a gift from my brother. The bookshelf? She always hated how crooked it looked. The rug? Maybe. But the dog chewed the corner, and she called it unprofessional. After a client once saw it on Zoom, none of it held value anymore. Not the way it used to. "This doesn't end here," she said. But there was no threat in it, just a reflex, like saying "bless you" to a cough. I tilted my head. "No, Megan. It ended a long time ago. You just didn't notice because you were too busy curating the next illusion." She looked away, back at the hallway, back at the photo she hadn't taken. "No one will believe you did this alone," she said finally. I almost laughed. "I didn't," I replied. "They believed the documents." And that was it. She didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't throw something to reclaim the scene. She just zipped the bag, slid it off the counter, and walked past me. At the door, she stopped, not to turn around, not for a final plea or a dramatic exit line. She just stood there for one last second. Maybe she wanted to feel something. Maybe she expected me to, but the weight wasn't mine anymore. She carried it now. She opened the door. The night air didn't flinch. The street was quiet. No drama. No storm, just streetlights and silence. She left. Suitcase wheels clicked once on the front step, then nothing. I stood in that hallway a moment longer than I needed to. Then I locked the door, not out of anger, out of clarity. Because for all the noise she'd made in every room she walked into, she never once understood the value of silence. It doesn't beg, it doesn't explain, it doesn't follow, it just ends. 1 month later, the invitation arrived. Not by email, not through some assistant's calendar ping, but as a thick white envelope hand-delivered to my doorstep. No return address. Just the company crest and the words, Strategic Advisory Circle, Confidential. Inside, a letterhead so crisp you could cut your thumb on it. My name in bold serif, time, location, non-disclosure terms. 12 seats. Private venue. No public announcement. Innovation roundtable. The kind of room where products are shaped before they become headlines. Where compliance, tech, policy, and vision don't compete. They conspire. I had been invited. Not recommended, not looped in, not copied for awareness. Invited. No +1, no name tag, no icebreaker game. When I arrived, the conference room was already half full. Tall windows, no phones allowed, NDAs re-signed at the door, high-backed leather chairs arranged in a clean circle around a table built for decisions. No stage, no applause, just chairs. I scanned the nameplates. Most were familiar. CTOs, external advisors. One federal tech regulator whose name had floated quietly through our old dinner conversations. But across from me, one seat was empty, the nameplate was gone, but the space it left was obvious. It created a small tension, like a missing tooth in an otherwise flawless smile. I set my laptop down, plugged in. Next to me, one of the consultants leaned in slightly. Mid-50s, sharp suit, the kind of voice that spent decades never being interrupted. That used to be her seat, he said quietly, not smug, not bitter, just noting history. I didn't respond, didn't nod, didn't look across, just opened my screen, logged in, pulled up a new document, and kept building. Because this seat wasn't revenge, it wasn't a trophy, it was proof. Proof that I didn't need the noise, didn't need her, didn't need Brent, didn't need a spotlight or a speech or manufactured applause. I had done what most people in that room had never even tried. Quietly dismantled a lie without breaking the system that housed it. That's what earned me this seat, and they knew it. They respected it. Megan had always said I was too silent, that I lacked presence, that people needed to feel you walk into a room or you'd be invisible. She never understood power isn't volume. Power is being the only one who doesn't need to raise his voice. So I sat, typed, listened, contributed when it mattered. And when a new proposal came up, a policy to tighten procurement oversight, I added 3 words to the draft that would quietly revolutionize internal compliance. Independent trail retention. No one argued. They just nodded. One even said, smart addition. And that was it. No dramatic arc, no music swell, just cold continuation. Because while Megan had spent years trying to be seen, I had become something much harder to replace. Necessary. So I stayed in the room she'd been removed from and kept doing the one thing she never thought I was capable of, building something that would outlast her.